Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Stay tuned for an interesting topic about a pioneering woman in the world of the comic books as we discuss Dorothy Woolfolk and comic books mirroring the real universe. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, author of Crazy Things, voice actor, book narrator. I also just, as of when we're recording this week, recorded my demo for my animation and video games. I am excited. It took only half hour to actually record it, which I know to anybody who's listening going, okay, yeah, so what's the big deal? That's fast. And that means that's how well prepped it was and how much my voice teacher, my voice trainer, voice coach has really worked on getting me to where I'm at. So quick shout out to Christina Smith, who is a fantastic voice work. Also to visit www.davidallenlucas.com. That's David, A-L-A-N, Lucas.com. And by the time this airs, the animation script will be up, as well as already my commercial demo is up there. When you click voice actor, you can go to that. And hopefully some information will be out there on my upcoming book by then. If not, well, it's still coming. It's a book series I'm going to have some special readers read behind me to make sure I'm not far off the mark of the reality of it. And with that said, sign up also for my monthly newsletter that will talk about writing topics. It will talk about voice acting. It will also talk about self-defense and much more. And with that said, I am done talking for the moment, and I'm going to kick this over to my lovely co-host, who is busy taking a bunch of notes on what I just said.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Kayembe. I am a writer with a day job, and by night I am a freelance editor, speculative fiction writer, paranormal romance writer under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and writing workshop leader. I recently graduated from the Writing the Other class. It ends this weekend. I'm so happy. It was wonderful. And what else? I have a story coming out in Lightspeed in November, so look for that. It's Lightspeed magazine. And finally, I will be a booth babe at Contagion at the booth of a marvelous illustrator and writer who happens to be sitting right beside me.
When is Contagion?
It is November 4th and 5th.
Perfect. This is airing on the first weekend of November, so everybody, you know where to go.
Get over there, because it's now.
Yes.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. I'll be at Contagion right now, so come see us if you are in the St. Louis area. I also will be signing, if you're in St. Louis, at 6 North Cafe on Clayton Road. That's December the 9th, with 3 other young adult and children's authors. Jessica Matthews, who is one of my clients, wrote The Old Man, the Pirate Princess. If you missed your pirate party, here's your second chance to get pirate swag. Jamie Krakover, who is a Write Pack member from the first couple seasons. Mm-hmm. She's there promoting the Brave New Girls in STEM anthology, which she's published. And another client of mine, Elena Deanne Coleman, who will be there with Mocha and My Path to the Sea, which I illustrated, and has received a 4 out of 5 stars from Authors Talk About It website. They said that it was a unique and, quote, downright captivating story. So,
and they said something about your illustration
being excellent.
Excellent.
It was an excellent review. Check all those things out on Amazon, or even better, come see us at 6 North or at Contagion.
And up next is the person who keeps me on the sanity straight and narrow.
I'm Melody Lucas. I have currently been doing no writing because, he's doing the writing and I'm doing the day job, and Maya or us are doing all the other stuff that we're supposed to be doing to, keep our lives running.
Yeah.
So,
It's a team effort.
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm George Soroy. I'm the president of the Missouri Writers Guild. I'm also an author of science fiction for the young adult reader. 3 of my books, technically 6 if you count the 5-part serial from Parts Unknown. They are all out in both paperback and ebook formats. Excelsior is currently out on audiobook from Parts Unknown. Will be coming soon for that. And the sequel to Excelsior, Ever Upward, Part 2 in the Excelsior Journey, is currently in edits and hopefully will be out before the end of this year. If you would like any more information about me, just head over to my website, he'sgotit.com.
Excellent. And don't forget, also, George, what else do you do?
I am also an audiobook narrator
There you go.
and a voice actor.
That's right. And coming to us, speaking of voice, is the man who is determined to not let being sick stop him from being part of Right Back, even if he has to do it remotely.
I might be having an asthma attack, but I'm still going to be here.
You got it.
Brad R. Cook, author of the Iron Chronicles, which, by the way, you can get the completed series as a whole package deal on my website, so check that out, bradarcook.com. And then coming November 25th is Steam Tree, the Airdranium adventure, the latest middle grade from my imagination. It's airships and dragons, so do check it out. And join me for the release party at Main Street Books. Find out all about it at bradarcook.com.
And Main Street Books is located, if you haven't heard before, in St. Charles, Missouri, on the beautiful historic district. Brad, just for those who can't spell, like myself, how do you spell the title of your book?
Steam Tree, S-T-E-A-M-T-R-E-E, as in steam and tree.
One word or 2 words?
One word.
And that Airdranium,
The Airdranium Adventure. You have to read the book to find out exactly what Airdranium is.
yes, but how do
But
you
I'll
spell
tell
it?
you, it's what allows air cities to stay in the sky.
Excellent. How do you spell it so anybody can look it up, is what I'm asking.
Okay. So Airdranium is A-I-R-D-R-A-I-N-I-U-M. Airdranium.
Thank you. And by the way, just for the audience, I could spell Steam Tree. I was trying to get that one out. So,
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
important to
people
know.
screwing up Steam Tree. Stream Tree is a big one.
oh, hey, there you go. So anyway, today we're going to talk about a woman who was a pioneer in the American comic book industry. Dorothy A. Woolfolk. She was born October 1, 1913, and died only about 17 years ago, November 27th, 2000. Now, who is this person? Now, I'll be honest, before we put this episode together, I had no idea. So, thank you to Wikipedia. I have some ideas now. She was an editor for DC Comics. She also wrote a lot, an uncounted number of comic book scripts for Wonder Woman. But that's not all. She also was the first female editor at DC, and she created the fictional metal that Superman quivers at, that Lex Luthor holds to his breast. What is it?
I was going to say his breast that developed cancer as a result.
Yes, yeah, exactly where I was going. It is kryptonite. So yes, you can thank Dorothy for that invention of Superman's greatest flaw. And boy, has kryptonite not just been the little green metal either. It has changed his personality and lots of other things. Red kryptonite, black kryptonite.
Well, she recognized that Superman needed a weakness
Mm-hmm.
to make him interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's a lot of people's complaint about Superman is that he's kind of bland because he doesn't have any, he can't hurt him, and he's morally upright, and he's always gonna make the altruistic decision.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got this thing that's beyond his control, and that introduces an entire new facet to his story and the strategies his villains have against him.
I totally agree.
Superman's kind of like cell phones are now. Like, in stories now, we're like, how do we get around the cell phone? Oh, it died.
Oh,
Yeah.
batteries.
Ouch.
Superman showing up, he's over there.
Uh-huh.
Across the world.
And I would agree, because that's one of the number one reasons that Jen was laying out there. I'm more a Batman fan than a Superman fan. Batman's true superpower is his pocketbook.
It's his
And his
smarts.
unwillingness to break.
Yeah, it's his undetermined, it's his, you know, unbreakable will.
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with Dorothy regarding the need of some sort of vulnerability for Superman, because during those early issues, if I'm not mistaken, he basically just did like a lot of beating up on small-time criminals
And Hitler.
and Hitler, you know, but he only did that on the covers.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing that was really they towed that line very nicely when they were doing the comics around that time. They never actually delved in storylines involving those characters going to Berlin and, you know,
But you
winning
had
the
to
war.
wonder why not.
Well, because if they did that, that would cheapen what our
Yeah.
soldiers were doing at that point.
Exactly.
No.
You know, like
Yeah.
but the you need to have, you know, like a sort of some sort of a villain, some sort of an Achilles heel, like as Dorothy was talking about, to give our characters something to fear. Because if they have nothing to fear, then what's the point of even reading them? Because you know that whatever gets put in front of them, they're just going to go ahead and beat it. You need to know that there is something that could stunt their progress.
I totally agree. And along with that, comic books itself has gone through multiple ages. And the age in which I absolutely hated, and I already said I was a Batman fan, I hated the TV show of the original 1960s Batman. As a kid, let me stop myself. As a kid, I loved it. And
Is that the campy one?
that's the campy
Yeah.
one.
Yes.
That, in fact, that is in kindergarten. I was catching this on reruns, but in kindergarten, Channel 11, which is a local station here, was changing the time period it was going to show it, and it was doing it in the middle of a cliffhanger. So I pretended I was sick, was sent home from
So
school.
it was not the same Bat Time. Liars!
It was, exactly. And I watched it, and as a kindergartner, I loved the campiness. As an adult, I absolutely hate the series, because the campiness destroyed, in my opinion, what Batman really was. And which now is where I'm going to lead to here. We went through it. I know I'm going down the Batman side where Dorothy wrote Wonder Woman and was influential in Superman. But Batman's important here in where I'm going, and with this episode. We get to the movie Batman, which was directed by
Tim Burton.
Thank you, Tim Burton, and Batman was done by
It was
Michael Keaton.
performed by Michael Keaton, yeah.
Right, Michael Keaton. And this is the first beginning of that transition from the cartoony style of Batman and of comic books to where we get to the now version, in which I'm going to throw out there all of Marvel right now. Christopher Nolan's Batman Dark Knight trilogy, what DC is trying to do and did with Wonder Woman, but trying to do with the rest that they're coming out with, and make it more gritty, more realistic, and more a reflection of modern day. I had a R here, so go with you first.
Me
and then-
first?
Yep.
Right. I think I've mentioned this in the past. I believe it was Folding Ideas who did a video about this, about the different televised Batman versions reflecting the different eras in which they come out and
Yes.
the needs.
There was a little snippet of that in one of the documentaries on the Batman and Robin
Well, there was,
DVD.
but just trying to attribute credit to this idea since I didn't do the research myself, but making the point that the era in which campy Batman came out was one that it was a reflection. Starting again because I'm getting a little whatever. Batman as a vigilante justice person reflects not only the world in which he is, but specifically the way the general American public views law enforcement. in the different portions of when he comes out. So back in what did you say it was the 60s?
Yeah, 1960s.
66. We were, people were trying to be like, oh, well, law enforcement, he helps law enforcement because there's everyone's worried about 60s like rebellion or whatever, and it's like the law enforcement are good, and it's like, so he's on the side of law enforcement. Then we get to the 90s, and people are a little bit less trusting of law enforcement, so the law enforcement, they feel is that Batman needs to go outside the boundaries of this. So we're gonna make a version of Batman that's closer to the comics with a corrupt police force, and he's got the good officer,
Mr. Gordon.
the good Commissioner Gordon. He can't get it done within his precinct, so Batman's gonna do the rest for him, and that was a grittier, more realistic. Then we transitioned into the later 90s. We were in a position, it was like this is the longest period of like international peace that America has had in a long time.
Yeah.
So we get into more of a jokey Batman kind of, it airs closer to the we're in with the police, but it's not, he's not going hand in hand with the cops, but the focus is not on the cops. The focus is on the colorful villains and the one-liners and the boom and the pow and the biff. And it's, that's a reflection of the late 90s. Then Christopher Nolan shows up, and it's again after 9/11. It's the beginning of the grimdark era of superheroes, when everyone is looking for the, real life, the world sucks, and no one can defend us against the bad guys that are coming to our country and dropping, using our own technology as bombs against us. And Batman needs to use fear and anger and a really growly, painful sounding voice to get the job done. And that's... he's Batman. That's a reflection of that mindset of America, specifically about safety, about law enforcement, about military things, about terrorism, because the terrorism is really what Batman's fighting. These like crazy villains that we don't know what they're gonna do, and the Joker is crazy, and he's there to make fear and panic and chaos.
I'm not crazy. I really am not. I'm not crazy at all. I'm sorry.
Batman needs to come here right now. But now we're in the new era of Batman.
Yeah.
The new era of Batman being the Justice League era of Batman, I'm going to call it, with Batman v Superman. And they're reinterpreting him again.
Right.
His current, he's less idealistic, he's more reactionary. Specifically, he's distrustful. Which I think also reflects the current state of the general population against law enforcement. As being in St. Louis, I hate to bring that up, but we have had a couple recent questions about the honesty and procedure of law enforcement.
You're so tactful. I love it.
I'm trying real hard.
Good job.
And that's just a small bit that's very close to us here in this room recording that is reflected throughout the rest of the country, and people are feeling like we need to have a Batman that doesn't really trust the system, that is willing to break, that sees Superman as a god that needs to be squelched because power is dangerous, that kind of thing. I don't know what Batman we're going to get in the Justice League movie, which isn't out yet at the time of this recording, but I guess we'll find out to see how it trends.
Yeah.
Did you see the trailer?
I haven't seen the second trailer. I saw the first trailer.
It's really cool Wonder Woman stuff. The Batman stuff's just okay.
Well, that was smart, because Wonder Woman's the stronger character right now in their pantheon after their Wonder Woman's movie.
She's the only character.
Come on. Aquaman is a surfer bro.
You see Aquaman.
I'm just saying that as far
Aquaman
as...
steals the whole show.
As far as...
I predict.
He's real pretty, yes. But as far as character growth and development go in the films, in the current run, Wonder Woman is the only character.
So far.
As of right now.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I agree.
Awesome. And awesome on Saturday Night Live.
Kathleen, George, and then back to Brad, and then myself.
Oh no, I actually put mine down because you brought up the Grimdark Gin, and I was wanting to discuss that a bit, because that is one aspect of the real world culture and cultural mindset that we have now that has definitely impacted comics and you know, the film universes of comics as well.
And it's all the post 9/11 stuff. It's
Mhm.
that since comics and movies, and I'm not saying that America does all of that, but America definitely is a large portion of like the media production of the entire world. So having a very, you know, something like, I mean, those of us who lived, you know, were of an adult age during 9/11, we saw our neighbors change. We felt ourselves change. I was a sophomore in high school, and I vividly remember my teacher crying in the room with me when we were watching the footage of the, you know, on 9/11, and thinking, this, you know, it's like, I still feel like a kid because I'm a sophomore in high school. This person's an adult, but she's just as scared as I am, and that was a moment that affected me profoundly, and I think everybody has a moment like that. Who, you know, it's our modern ages. Where were you when Kennedy got shot? We never imagined something like that could possibly happen, and that is then reflected in our media. It's reflected in our superheroes because our superheroes are our power fantasies. How do we respond to something like foreigners showing up and killing thousands of people? Well, we respond by then translating those feelings into our power fantasies. How do our superheroes respond when maybe not that exact thing happens, but against, you know, huge odds? And a lot of the time, and at the time of the, you know, the 2000s, the early 2000s, a lot of it was they responded to a world that was as dark and as evil and as gritty and as bloody as we felt like the world around us actually was, and that's why grimdark became a thing.
I just want to say two things real fast before everyone else jumps in.
Yeah.
One, and I think honestly, the world of superheroes, if you will, the comic books, have always been said to be a retelling of mythology. It's our modern mythology, which goes along exactly with what you just said. And number two, as just for myself, real fast, yeah, I really wish we could have just had the whole. Where were you when you shot John F. Kennedy? I've gone through Challenger, 9/11, and I'll just end it there and go for it. So I've got Kathleen, George, Brad, Melanie, and then myself.
Just on the comic books note, I saw Writing the Other lecture by Max Gladstone on world building, and one of the things he talked about was ideology and the set of beliefs a culture has about itself and what it tells itself about itself. And one of the things that he noted in that lecture was our favorite comic book superheroes right now, at least on the big screen, are Batman from the Christopher Nolan trilogy and Tony Stark from the Iron Man series and the Avengers. And these are both billionaire, like these are both smart billionaire superheroes with no oversight, who were going off and just doing what they think should be done in the world with no with no oversight, no checks or balances.
Well, they've got all the money in the world to do whatever they want with, so they don't have that. And they also have placed themselves as a moral authority over the rest of the world, so there's no one above them ideologically that's telling them what to do. And the comics are written as so that's true. We're supposed to believe that Iron Man and Batman are the moral authority, and when they do something kind of iffy, then we expect them to learn from that and then turn it around and become the moral authority again.
But like those are the two superheroes our culture is most looking at and interested in right now. So what does that say about our culture?
Well, it's a sign also that they sort of turned Superman into that too. In Man of Steel, he became a grittier, darker, more troubled person as opposed to the Christopher Reeves version that we were used to seeing on TV.
Just to kind of go back a little bit to the to Batman and Superman both on television, when Superman first made his leap onto television during the 1950s, that was definitely during a more quote unquote like utopian type of time and everything for the typical like American family, like, you know, during that period. It really was kind of a, you know, golly gee willikers, you know, like everything is all, you know, all happy and everything at that point. When Batman came out, you know, you're talking about like 1966. You have Vietnam that's already like kind of ramping up. You have a whole lot of unrest. You have the civil rights, the civil rights marches. You got a whole lot of stuff going on that the networks and everything did not want to trouble their shows with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, like, it was very much in the same vein as when the Monkees came out at the same time. They were forbidden to talk about anything that was going on in the world. And there was the same thing with the Batman television series. And the thing about that one was they put in, like, a lot of, like, pretty colors and everything to really kind of give you that sort of adventure and everything. But at the same time, the great thing that William Dozier did when he was developing this version of the 60 series was he made law enforcement look stupid by doing it.
Yeah.
You have Chief O'Hara, who is just like as cliche a cop as you possibly
Even
can.
an Irish accent.
Right. You have Commissioner Gordon, who is just sitting at a desk and everything, and pulling up the cake topper and calling up Batman on the red phone and everything to let him do all the work.
Right.
So you have that sort of edge to it. Now, granted, like at that point, yes, like when you take a look at it at first glance, it doesn't age well for the kids and everything that grew up with it in syndication, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a minute, that means that Batman is supposed to be laughed at. That's what Michael Uslan was thinking about in the 1970s when he got the sudden idea to create the Batman film, a straight-laced, like no-nonsense, no pow, zap, and wham version of Batman, and it took over 10 years for that to finally hit. And the only reason why it hit was because they got the right people attached to it, which were Sam Hamm to work on the screenplay, and you got Tim Burton to do the to do the directing, and you also had John Peters and Peter Guber who actually like bought into that understanding and were able to make it happen.
That was a far more insightful treatise on 66 than I was given, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Brad next, but before I do, I just want to say, and I'm putting this out there real fast, after Melanie, I've got a direct tie-in to what you just said, because you just opened up the door for me.
Sweet.
But Brad, you've
Why
been
not?
waiting for a long time, and Melanie's staying with you, so go for it, Brad.
Yeah, so I wanted to throw out that Bruce Timm has addressed this in the Batman universe beautifully and perfectly, I might add, that the campiest versions of the Bat, where he's running around fighting, Piano Man and his piano henchman or some crazy crap like that. That's early Batman, and it's about Batman as he kind of transforms and emerges out and fights all these weird gangs and stuff like that. Then he transitions in when the Joker shows up, and it gets darker and it gets grittier and crazier like that, until you get to the final Batman, which is Batman taking on Superman. And fighting him because he realizes that Superman might actually be somewhat of a threat to the world. So Bruce Timm has done this beautiful thing throughout. There's some in the old series that dealt, like single episodes that dealt with this, but really it's kind of the different movies that he's done since then, and creating these different incarnations, but essentially letting Batman evolve from your earliest, the campy Bat, through the most grittiest Bats of Miller. Sorry,
Frank Miller, yeah.
Frank Miller,
Miller's- yeah.
I'll
So I
argue
just
Frank
want to throw that
Miller's
out there, and then obviously you were mentioning that the whole mythology thing. Superman is Hercules. There's no difference really whatsoever. So
And
it
Batman
is
is Hades.
totally agreed.
Melanie, and then
Yeah,
me.
I don't want to take us off on too much of a tangent, but a while ago now, mentioned that 9/11 changed things. It was a major attack on U.S. soil, made it look like, things like that would never happen here. Well, I've lived abroad, and my dad was born in another country, and my grandmother has actually lived through bombings by the U.S. No, it was by Iraq. Iraq was bombing that time. Speaking of that time, namely, I never got that feeling of being immune from this. In fact, my dad had the feeling of what was the big deal? You're attacked, you recover and go on. From him, it's like, this happened in New York. Why are we doing something strange and being all shut down in St. Louis? It's like, yeah, they need to recover there, but why are we all shut down? I guess my mom probably felt what you guys all felt. I don't know how my sister felt. My sister guess where she flew out from? She flew out from Logan Airport on November 10th.
Wow.
So, yeah, my mom really felt something. My cousins who lived in Boston at the time knew people that died on the airplanes. So, yeah, people were affected. But the whole thing of, I think the difference is we didn't really think we were immune. We were shocked because we didn't think we were at war either.
Yeah.
But,
Not to get too far into it, to quote,
yeah.
there was it's funny that a friend of mine who's from Britain at the time said the same thing, that I also heard the exact same line on a TV show that came from Britain. And just when it mentioned 9/11, said, welcome United States to the world at large.
Yeah.
So, George, you got a tie-in, and I've got my tie-in back into what you were saying earlier.
Just a quick aside, not to make light of 9/11 at all.
No, never.
But there is also something that changes everything, and that's money. There's one thing to keep in mind is that if Batman and Robin, the 1997 atrocity that it was a success,
Yeah.
then we would continue to see films of that nature continue on.
Right.
The fact that it disappointed at the box office, I'm not sure if it was like a full-on bomb. It definitely was #1 that weekend, but it tailed off pretty quickly. But it definitely had the lowest grossing out of all 4 of them. That was the signal that, okay, maybe Batman needs to take a break from being on the big screen.
Right.
That had one good line. Holy rusted metal, Batman.
And that was not even that one. That was the third one.
That was Batman versus
Holy
Robin.
singing
No, that was
metal.
Batman Forever.
Oh,
Batman
okay.
Forever.
Holy
Yes,
Rusted
I
Metal.
remember that one line too. It's the only
And
one.
I still remember the gasp from the crowd on opening night when Robin said that. And then once they got through that, then everyone was just like, oh, good. Okay. Because they were afraid that it wasn't going to be that, it wasn't going to go into that sort of mode.
Yeah.
Turns out, 2 years later, it did.
Yeah.
But in a really, really ugly way. So, but yeah.
We've been talking a lot about the TV versions of the comic books. I'm going to jump into the comic book itself. And I want to talk about briefly, we've gone from ages, and the comic book itself has gone through different ages, the golden age, the silver age, etc. of how gritty or how campy it could be. But the comic book, which I think is one of the reasons why a certain idiot psychologist claimed that it was going to warp the minds of our children and all this stuff, and Congress bought into it.
Dr. Frederick Wortham.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid his name because I'm going to borrow from Londo from Babylon 5 and change this here. Only an idiot thinks comic books have no worth. Only the heir to the kingdom of the idiots can come up with this bullshit. Okay, but what I was going to say really fast is...
Just remember, too, they said the same thing about the book. It was going to corrupt.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Anything new is going to ruin the children.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
But-
by
but the children-
reading comics. By reading comics, you were gonna, the kids would stay indoors and therefore get asthma. That's what they were like putting the blame on.
Yeah.
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 But one of the
That's
things...
what happened.
There you go. But one of the things comic books has been known for, either underground or overtly, and that is addressing social issues. We saw in the X-Men, where, in fact, the entire concept of the X-Men is the minority versus majority, if you will. Another aspect, too, of the X-Men, it did address gay marriage. I don't care where you stand on it. Nevertheless, that goes into it.
Let's stand on the fact that it's legal.
Well, agree. I'm not saying. I'm not trying to open up politics here, though. That's comic books is known to open up the politics, and it's something which we need to recognize. As even when comic books were so far away from modern world, if you will, it was campy. It was cartoony. It was still throwing in a lot of the serious reality that was happening out there, just doing it in the undercurrents. And now we're actually seeing a lot more of that, thanks to the Grim Dark, coming out more overtly. Now I've got Kathleen, and I've got Brad. Brad's been waiting. Kathleen, you're next after Brad.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I wanted to throw out my favorite comic books since we're talking about comics. So one of them is The Watchmen, which is one of the grittiest comic books that exists, and is such a look into the world. Yeah, they're trying to throw you an alternative world, but really what they're doing is they're peeling back the world that you know and showing you kind of things of that. But I would also throw out my other favorite series, which is, of course, Green Arrow. I've loved him forever and ever. He touched on drug addiction.
Yes.
Back in the 60s, before that all happened.
Yes.
Iron Man touched on alcoholism, and
Yes.
even you have some of the handicap rights and stuff that come up with not only Iron Man when he couldn't walk for that whole stint, but also then with Barbara Gordon and the really horrible thing that they did to her in
Killing Joke.
Killing Joke, yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, these are things that you can totally drop on that are like topical issues that we deal with in today's, you know, or throughout. The comics are touched on specifically throughout their entire incarnation practically.
Yep. And I'm going to tie in that to what he said after Kathleen. Go for it.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, whenever people say comics shouldn't be political, I'm like, but they've always been. They have a long and illustrious history of dealing with political topics.
Yes.
Like, I mean, Marvel places things in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
and DC also deals with real world issues, even though it veils its locations as things like Gotham instead of New York City, or
And Star City.
Metropolis
And, yeah.
instead of Chicago. So I mean, like, Captain America punching Hitler in the face is pretty political.
Uh-huh.
When it came out, there was no question it was political. And then Wonder Woman was used in the women's liberation movement
Yep.
a lot.
Yep.
There's a trans woman in the Sandman comics
Uh-huh.
before we really talked about trans issues. Oh my goodness. And there was gay bashing in Green Lantern, and all of those things tried to show people that there were cultures and minority groups that were underrepresented and deserved a place at the table, basically.
And don't forget, when Batman, let's mention that, Batman first came out, where was the United States and the world itself? The Great Depression.
So,
And major corruption. So, yeah.
So I mean, comics have always dealt with political issues.
That's what I was going with what I said earlier.
They're able to do it better or worse depending on who's publishing them. Because I remember there was a Tony Stark, an Iron Man, either a cover or a panel where his hand, you see his hand kind of fall. He's sitting in a chair in the dark in like a hotel room or something, and his hand just kind of falls to the edge of the chair like he's passed out. And there used to be a needle that he was dropping. And the people, the editors or the people publishing comics and making sure they were sanitary and wonderful for everyone were like, you can't put that needle there. But the comic was clearly about alcoholism and drug abuse. I mean, it was tackling something real that was of concern and still is of concern.
Back when censorship was really high in America, exactly the point.
And on a related note to the censorship and who's publishing who, now there are a lot more independent comics. I mean, the world of comics and what gets published has changed a lot. It was funny papers and you know, comedian sorts of things, and then there were superheroes, and now with smaller presses like Image Comics, people are able to publish things that they really care about. Like, there are graphic novels, there are coming of age stories in comics now that are nothing related to superheroes or just comedy. I mean, comics have changed so much, and it's an entire medium. It's not just a single genre of work. It is a medium, like film. Like, it's like, oh my goodness, sorry. People who are like, I don't like comics. I'm like, really? Would you say I don't like TV? I don't like film? I don't like books? Like, it's the same thing. There's so many different genres in there.
And honestly, a few
forms.
people would.
Yes,
Yeah.
those people. And I judge them. And I judge them.
No, but a
Maybe
few
judge.
people is like, yeah, I just can't I can't get lost in it, or like I like to read, but I never really get into TV or something. There are some people that just don't prefer certain media. They are
Oh,
the
I
exception.
know. I have brothers that don't like books, and I'm like, what are you, and how are we related? But I mean, I know they like good stories, and comics, they tell a lot of good stories. It's just a different medium.
Agreed. What I was going to go to is, and then George will be after me, is it's comic books that started putting in America, other people of other cultures or other color finally into a hero role. I don't know who was first, but I'm just going to mention something I can think of off the top of my head that I'm throwing out there. Luke Cage, the guy who, I can't remember his non-superhero name, but Black Panther, and there's others.
T'Challa.
Thank you.
was
My mind went
Wakanda.
blank
Yep.
with it. But and when they did that, they're able to also explore that culture, and they do it, I think, for what it's worth, in a way that is respectful to that culture. Now, if there might be people out going, well, what about blah 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 character? Not
It
okay.
depends on the writer and the era.
It depends on
Like,
the writer. Depends on the era.
Yeah, because I mean, Blade, as we see in the film,
Oh,
is
yeah.
awesome. Played by Wesley Snipes. Blade, as the character was conceived in the 70s, was total Afro blaxploitation.
Oh, he
So-
was full on Shaft. He was
It
Shaft
was-
with a sword. You know.
Ah. See, I have to admit, I didn't see
And
Blade.
films.
Didn't know Blade until the movies came out. So, thank you, Wesley Snipes. I'm sorry that you ended up going to jail for tax evasion and so forth.
But
thank
he's
you for
back
giving it.
and he's doing
He's-
just fine.
He's
so.
trying to get his career back.
Two things I just wanted to follow up on what Kathleen was talking about. Stan Lee had told the story about how he was contacted by the government to put together an issue in one of the comics, it wound up being Spider-Man, that dealt with drug abuse. And he basically came up with this story about this drug that was this one kid was high on, and he thought he could fly, and he wound up jumping off of a building, and Spider-Man got to swoop in and save him and give him some sort of stern thing like, why are you taking that? And at that point they were working with the Comics Code Authority,
Mm-hmm.
and they were rejecting the comic because of the drug use. And so Stan basically just said that they took the Comic Code seal off of this one, published it anyway, and it wound up getting a lot of recognition for it. And the other thing, I'm so glad you mentioned Image Comics, because one of the great things about comics in general, it really, this can apply to anything. Competition is a great thing, because during the time when Image Comics came out, everything was kind of at like a bit of a lull. Everything was just everything had just kind of settled down into everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Image Comics comes out in 1991, and all of a sudden, all these incredibly talented writers and artists, some of them writer artists, all are stealing the thunder from Marvel and DC. So what do Marvel and DC do? They start ramping things up on their own levels.
Yeah.
So they did wind up doing two different things that really would not have happened, I don't think, if Image Comics hadn't come along. They broke Batman's back,
Yep.
and they killed Superman. Both of those things happened as a result of Image Comics coming out and taking the thunder from Marvel and DC.
They deserve to have some thunder stolen, though.
They did, and that
Yeah.
was, and because of that, and Image Comics wound up creating a whole new kind of feeling for it, for comics.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
Competition made for better art.
I can argue against the death and return of Superman being better art.
Well,
Well,
Okay.
it definitely shook things up, and it did create
It really did.
a huge money making blitz for DC. So gotta give them credit where it's due. The way the return did, I don't know, but the death and the funeral for a friend, I thought were handled very well.
In fact, that comic, which is being reflected I'm only basing this on the trailers for Justice League coming out. When Superman died, it was affected around the world, and people were mourning. A fictional cartoon character. Well, guess what? It become more than that. And I think it's something which comics themselves is able to do, and able to be the mirror of society, just like a regular book is, but through a different method and media that's unique to them.
Well, okay, so we're talking about comics mirroring the real world, but I know not everybody likes to write comics. So, I mean, what lessons can writers learn from comics? in using the real world in our own work to be just as effective and powerful.
Well, as a hobbyist in the comic world, I do fan comics, and not just like strips. I've done a couple that are long form, multi-chapter fan comics that try and tell a story. The things that I learned, one as an artist, is the importance of design. Like design something that you can easily recreate, but also is attention getting. So as an artist, it improved my art because you aim for silhouette and for color and for little stuff like remembering the shape of the eyes of all your characters. So if you do a close-up, they know which one they're looking at, that kind of thing. For a writer, it taught me how to be concise because you only got so much room on that panel.
Right.
And if your character decides to talk for 3 years, then you have pretty much the page of a book. And if you have a long conversation between two people, before long, your entire comic book is two people standing in a room talking to each other. So it taught me to say what I need to say in the fewest amount of words possible, which is good, because mostly, it's like that makes for good writing just normal. You don't have to say 3 sentences when one can suffice, especially if that one sentence is more powerful to get the point across. Also, cut out repeating people's names as often as you can, because normal people don't do that in conversations, say each other's names over and over again. It sounds good in our heads, but it's not normal. That saves you space in the panel. And also try and have your conversations during something you can put in the frame. Maybe they're walking through the woods. Maybe they're building something. Maybe they're we can have the conversation while there's movement happening. They're changing rooms, they're getting on a plane. Perhaps we see it Indiana Jones style, we see the plane crossing the Atlantic, and you're doing 2 things at once with your page because you've only got like 11 pages in this issue, and you gotta fill it with something that isn't just this one conversation. Things have to happen. There's pacing. So there's a lot to learn if you're trying to make comics. You learn about shot variety for art. Like I was becoming a film director. I need a close-up, I need a mid-shot, I need a wide shot, I need an establishing shot. And those are things that writers can think about, oh, well, I should probably give a detail that's sort of a middle distance detail. I should give a detail that's close-up detail. I can talk about the twitch in his eyebrow that you're noticing. That's a close-up detail. But then the mid detail is like those, the light bulb flickered in the old lamp. And that's a mid, and then establishing shots, the old house was this way, and this way, to broaden and then bring the camera in and try and keep a variety of details. Like thinking about things cinematically and comic bookily, visually. Thinking about things visually gives you a more visceral, tangible book world, even when it's just words.
What can we say? We're in America. We're allowed to create new words at a drop of a hat.
Comic bookily.
Yeah. I'm going to go Kathleen, George, and then Brad. So go Kathleen.
What you said reminded me of something that Shonda Naguire said on a panel at Archon about diversity. She said she used to work at Disney, so something that she does when she's creating characters is she will draw them to make sure that characters don't look too much alike. Like from silhouette, as you were saying, to hair color, eye color, skin color, and style. So that's one of the ways that she makes sure all of her characters are different and that there is diversity of cast. She'll draw them out.
And you can definitely see what you were talking about come to life on the big screen in a specific scene in Avengers: Age of Ultron, the wood chopping scene, because you have two major characters, both of them in a very important conversation. You're starting to see the sort of fracture between the two of them regarding their philosophies. But there's action going on. There's, both of them just like chopping wood as they go along. You can see the tension getting higher and higher, and then you really see it reach its zenith when Steve Rogers actually grabs a piece of wood and rips it in half. And that's just a great, piece of action right there. It's a short, concise, very well-written scene. It's a major highlight of that movie, I would say.
Well, it's also informative about the different characters as well. What is Steve doing? Steve is doing work.
Yeah.
He is helping the household by chopping wood.
Yep.
He's strong, he's using his muscles to do it, but he's doing it positively versus standing around and talking about the problem.
Yeah.
And then to make his point, he shows his strength by ripping it with his hands. He's very strong and he's able to be violent if he has to. And that's the point he's making in the conversation. It's like, I have this ability, but I'm putting it in check because that's Steve Rogers' character.
And you can also see that end on a very funny note, like right at the very end when Tony's walking away and he yells at Steve, like, don't touch my pile. And his pile is like a fraction of the size of what Steve has right now.
Right. Brett?
Real quick, I was just going to throw out a resource for anyone who wants to continue what the comics and the history of comics means and how they've touched on social issues and issues of the world. There are two great documentaries. I recommend them both. The first one is my personal favorite, and it is Superheroes Unmasked, hosted by Peta Wilson. And the other one is Superheroes Decoded. And both of them will give you a wonderful history of comic books, all the censorship we've been talking about, all the issues that we've been talking about, the issue comics, the drug addictions and all that kind of stuff. They're just great, documentaries on how comics have shown us the world.
There's also, and I'm trying to remember who put it out there. It was done with the Smithsonian, but I can't remember who the actual online education center is. But with Stan Lee, went through exactly the same as we were just talking about here. The time periods and so forth of the comic books and showed more detail of how they've changed and so on. I'm going to try to look that up before we go. But also, too, another resource about how to write comic books. It's online. Is a website called SuperheroNation.com. And Superhero Nation is one word. I don't know how often they update. The last update that I'm aware of, according to what I see right now, is April 11th, 2017. But there is a lot of resources, what to avoid, what not to avoid, how to write it, and so forth. And with that said, I do want to say, before I get too late, because we are getting close to the end, one more thing about Dorothy Woolfolk. She didn't just write comic books and so forth. She also wrote a bunch of children's books. And in fact, there were 10 books she wrote between 1970 and 1980. It was published by Scholastic Press. It was a young adult novel series about a teen detective named Donna Rockford. She also wrote for science fiction magazine Orbit during the 1950s. So this woman was very active, very prolific, if you will, in what she did, and has impacted probably a lot of genres that we didn't realize that she had actually touched on. While I look, who wants to take the floor? Because I need to look up this class I was talking about.
Just one thing to note about comics, and this is something that I really believe in about comics themselves, like when they're at their best. Yes, the worlds that that the characters live in show us a mirror of what our current world is, but the characters themselves can show us what we can be. That's something that I really believe in. We can either go in this direction or this direction, and it's really up to us to make that choice. And obviously, we can't be Superman, but we can strive to be super in our own way.
Right. I just found that class, so Roy Fast. It is The Rise of Superheroes and Their Impact on Pop Culture, which was put out by edX, edx.org.
And a lot of credit goes to the gentleman I mentioned before, Michael Uslan. He was the first one who had really gotten a course about comic books accredited in colleges. And so thanks to him, now we have various pop culture types of classes that are available in colleges and universities all over the place.
Mm-hmm. I will say, as I Google searched that class from edX, I saw that there was a listing for Stan Lee doing online classes for free. I have not taken it. I don't know if that's true or not. I was shouting it out there. Google it, search for it, see what you guys think.
How to do a movie cameo.
Yeah. Seriously. And with that, any final thoughts on comic books and reflection on
The
mirror?
Smithsonian really needs to put in the Captain America display from the movies.
Oh, God, yeah.
great.
Writing comic books is fun. Everyone should give it a try. You might find you like it, and even if you don't, it's a learning experience.
Especially if you're a scriptwriter, it's a great way to apply your script writing skills to writing comic book scripts.
Mhm.
Because
They are really close.
it is pretty close in format. You just have to be mindful about panels.
Mhm.
That's pretty much the thing.
And if for some reason you don't actually want to write a comic book, but you like the idea of writing about superheroes, well, guess what? Those books exist as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've got DC and Marvel has got their books out there, and I am going to get up real fast because I've got a book by a author who we've met.
Yes.
Here we go. I just want to make sure I had his name correct. And Brad drools over wishing he had this guy's name because he's right. It is the perfect
It is
author
the greatest pen name of all time.
It's not a pen
It's
name.
not a pen name. It's
actual
his real name. And
That's the best part.
I know. It is Van Allen Plexico. That
And
is
Nice.
Van Allen, which is spelled differently than the Allen in my name. Allen. You'd be surprised how many people misspell my name. And Plexico. Plexico.
just so you know, depending on when you listen to this, if you're listening to this when it airs, you have a little bit to wait. But if you're listening to this in or after 2018, Van and I are putting out a comic together next summer.
Oh!
So I'm doing the pencil work for it, and he's written the script, and I'm already working on the pencils as we speak, but I have a lot of work left to do.
Okay, just for the, if you didn't catch that from everybody here, she just dropped this bomb on the right pack, and we see each other on
I thought
more
for
than
certain I told you guys
more
about this.
than once a week basis. So, wow, congrats.
Yeah, we met at Archon last year,
Uh-huh.
and then reintroduced ourselves. We bonded over Babylon 5 because he's
Yay.
met all of them, and I'm a little jealous of that. I keep hoping that he invites me to something so that I can meet the ones that are left anyway.
Yeah.
But he's very popular at Dragon Con, and that's where he's met them all over the course of many years. Then he spoke to the Writers Guild about
Yep.
Pulp Fiction.
That's St. Louis Writers Guild.
Yeah, the
yes.
St. Louis Writers Guild about writing for the modern pulp.
Uh-huh.
And I gave him my card because I would really like to get into some pulp covers, doing some more like high fantasy, sci-fi, action-oriented covers and not just children's books all the time. And so when he checked out my stuff, he said, "You're perfect for the script I've written." So that's how that got started.
Wow.
Also a statement about how just try and make as many connections as you can. Make friends, bond over whatever, because you never know when an opportunity is going to open up, and I'm really excited about this project, so.
And
Awesome.
on that note, I don't know how else to finish it, but say, tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. Follow what Jen told you, and take care. Thank you for listening. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry.